Hey, everybody. Hi, Deborah. Hey, Chris.
Hello.
Right. How are you guys today?
Good.
Good. Awesome. Awesome. All right. I am excited to talk about our book today. We'll give it another minute or so, and then we'll get started. We are going to be finishing up commitment number 2 today. And then next week, we're going to be working in commitment 3. And we'll see how that goes. I want to get your feedback from those of you that are always here, which is all of you, around the pace that we're moving at.
You were master when he gave me strict orders.
The pace that we're moving at. So before we get started, let's try to tackle that. So I know in the beginning I mentioned like the pace we were going to take pretty slow with the first and second commitment, only because even the authors of the book said don't even go any further until you've actually mastered these. And we know that we can't just rest here. We got to keep moving. But I think one of the things is I wanted to create I wanted to have some synergy around these first 2 things, because the first 2 commitments, because the other 13 are important, and you'll see how they all kind of layer in together if you've read ahead or if you read this book before. But more than anything, I really wanted us to really glean a lot from this that we were working on and chewing on. So please come off of mute. Tell me your thoughts about potentially moving through each one of the commitments after we finish up this week's 1 commitment a week, meaning one of the chapters, if you will. So if you have any questions about it, or if you're like, I don't know if I could commit to reading one of the chapters a week, that's okay too. I just kind of want to get a pulse on where you guys are. Whoever wants to go first.
I'll go. I'm fine with that pace. It's really good read once you get into it. Very relatable. So actually, while there's so much value in here, like like I said, I'm on board because there's other books I want to get into too. So
okay, cool.
That's my
Everybody
share.
else? And it all goes. So we'll take it all in consideration. And we'll make a decision together.
I think a chapter a week actually is a fairly good pace. I think that maybe once we get into a discussion, if it sticks in one chapter, maybe at that point we can say, well, let's continue next week.
Yeah.
I think that maybe we could do that.
Okay, perfect. Eric, Kristen?
And no, I agree. Same thing, Tim. It's totally doable. I'm looking at it right now. The chapters are not very long, and kind of like what Deborah said, if we get into a discussion where we need a little bit more time, I think as a group, that's what this group is all about, leadership. Just make a decision, and if we need to extend it to next week, then we can do that.
Perfect. Awesome. Yessie, does that work for you? One of the commitments a week? Okay, perfect. I see that. All right. Awesome. All right. Well, let's get started. We are, again, finishing up commitment number 2, taking radical responsibility. So we kind of left off talking about the drift and shift model. Before I get started, I kind of wanted to hear from you guys as you've been, kind of marinating and probably rereading like myself. And as we move through this book, I can already tell you I'll be going back and rereading some of these things. But I'd like to hear from you guys this week, maybe some examples of things where you're kind of using these skills, or at least identifying when you're drifting and starting to shift.
I'll go. Just drifting to shifting on page 70. He gives a list of examples of drifting. And when I'm first reading it, like the drift shift model, and I'm like, okay, I understand what he's saying. And then I turned and I was like, holy wow, like there's a lot of things that I didn't consider drifting that he's saying, like, in a sense you are drifting, and just be aware of it so you can shift yourself out of that into being above the line and being purposeful and intentful. So that stuck out to me. And I mean, there's such a big list that I'm sure everyone can relate, and that's all.
Yeah. I think for me, to your point, Chris, when I was reading this, one of the things that I do is I'm sarcastic, and I always play it off like I was just joking. In reality, sarcasm is a way of being, for another term is passive aggressive, right? You mean to say something. And so as opposed to, you feel like you're being victimized or whatever, you're starting to respond below the line, because sarcasm always is your way of kind of cutting at the other person, making fun of them. And it's not to say we can't joke. That's not what I'm saying. But I realize when I'm being sarcastic is typically because I'm upset about something, right? And so as opposed to just saying, hey, that really hurt, I think that's probably been the hardest thing for me, is just telling other people that you actually hurt me. Like I felt really hurt by what you said. And as opposed to me acting below the line and just saying, so I'll say something sarcastic, as opposed to just being direct. Or maybe I'm not in a space to let them know that I'm upset because I'm too upset and I need a minute. And so I'm sarcastic.
I think for me, Tim, getting overwhelmed. We've been overwhelmed this past week, right, with a lot that's happening with the business and the growing and the growth. And so for us, it can be pretty taxing. Kristen's in education. I'm working, so it gets tough. But I do like on page 70 where it says, will we drift? We will. It's how long we stay in that drift before we make that shift. And I think that's what this whole book is about. That's what we're learning here. Okay. We're learning that skill. And if you skip over to page 71, shifting is a master skill of conscious leaders. So right now I've been walking around unconscious for a very long time. And it took something like this. It's a matter, okay, I know I'm going to be overwhelmed. How long am I going to stay there? And I think that's why I'm here, is to try to figure out how long or how fast I can get out of that mode. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Yessie, you had your hand up earlier. Did you want to share something?
Well, yes. Both of you guys actually know what I was saying. I actually practiced what you said earlier, Tim, about being sarcastic. I'm a very sarcastic person, and I could totally own up to that because I know and I'm aware that I'm doing it. I just, didn't realize that it was, like blocking me from actually being a nice person. I was hiding my emotions by being sarcastic. So I actually was identifying that this morning, actually, with my mom, and I caught myself, and I'm like, let me just stop for a minute. I'm not in the right thinking brain right now. And then I stopped, and then I voice messaged her kindly. And I just told her, I was like, telling her that actually hurt my feelings, instead of being sarcastic, like that actually hurt my feelings, and I just told her my opinion. And it's been really hard though, because I think me backing away and not being sarcastic and being that person that I was before, and seeing her kind of react towards the way I'm acting now, she's like, whoa, like, and she doesn't like it. And then she's just like, what is going on? And she gets offended. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And then I'm like, I'm trying to be a better person. I'm like, what do I do? So I'm practicing it. It happened this morning where I wanted to be very sarcastic and I didn't. And exactly.
You're on mute. You muted yourself.
Okay, sorry. And kind of like how Eric said, when can I start being fully conscious? Like, where can I get out of this funk? Like, reading this book, I'm kind of like, okay, when can I start? Well, putting the actions really and practicing them daily. And I did that this morning. And I just have to say that really made me feel good, knowing that I was aware of me being sarcastic and stopping myself. And I even actually text Chris and I sent him the conversation, and he's like, wow, he's like, you did great. He's like, I'm proud of you, and just edifying that I did well. And I'm like, you know what, I'm practicing this. Even if someone's not going to accept me practicing being a better person, I'm just going to continue to try to be better. So
Yeah.
just wanted to share.
That's awesome. So good. I love that. Anybody else? All right. We're going to move forward then. Man, some great shares. And I think, to your point, Yessie, I think the thing that I'm struggling with is, I think probably what we all struggle with is people are going to start to experience us different. They've always told us we've always fit into a certain story with them. Like, I can get you to react with me in a certain way. Our relationship looks like this. And so when you start to change who they are, they're going to want to try to pull you back. You've all have heard of the crabs in the pot analogy, right? The crabs that are starting to crawl out of the pot of boiling water. What do the other crabs do? They try to pull them back in, right? The other crabs are going to die. And the ones that are trying to escape are being pulled back by other crabs. And that's just the reality of us as human beings. It isn't healthy, but the reality is somebody has to go first. And you guys are going first. We're all going first in our lives. And it starts with us taking radical responsibility of where we are. And so often, and I want to encourage all of you, because we all need this encouragement. This is how we break generational curses. This is how we start to, our families start to experience us differently. This is how we leave a better legacy, is by taking responsibility for who we are. And then we can't blame, well, I was raised this way. Well, my mom, my dad, right? That's all the victims, right? We know better. And so we're starting to practice doing better. And that's what I want to encourage you guys with. I have to constantly remind myself, I'm still practicing. I'll be practicing until I go home. That's how I feel about it. I'll be practicing for a very long time and I'll never get it right, but I'm going to get better. And that's the mindset that I've adopted, is I'm going to get better every single day that I practice, and I'm going to fail a bunch more times, but I'm learning to fail forward. I'm continuing to move forward and being more conscious about what I do and shifting, hopefully sooner and sooner. And some days I don't shift well at all. But just knowing that I'm practicing getting better is what's helping me. So Chris, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, because I only brought up like the example of the drifting, but just to wrap up, like with shifting, since it's the next thing, on 71, where he says the first two shift moves for more our body chemistry. It's funny because I did it today at work. I mean, maybe I'll relate to you from like a medical field, where people that have anxiety or they're in a state of heightened levels of distress, and their breathing is rapid, and they're just not able to control their emotions. We learned a skill in EMS where we just tell them to focus on their breathing and edify them and tell them they're in control and coach them through it. And he says the first thing is conscious breathing, and to bring you out of that emotional brain, laboratory brain, into your thinking human brain. And I didn't even, like, today just kind of connected the dots for me. So it's like, we have a patient and they're real anxious and whatever, their heart rate's high, and it's just coach them through, be calm, reassuring. And what do you know, like on our monitor, we see their heart rate go from like 130 to 100 in a matter of a minute or two, just from focus on your breathing, bring you out of that state. They're taking control of their emotions and their mindset. And that patient was battling the adrenaline, being amped on adrenaline and cortisol. He says on the next page, trying to shift our perspective while being amped on adrenaline and cortisol is impossible. So that's why the first key step is to consciously breathe, and then next radically change your posture, because body language is also everything. That's another skill that, like, in EMS and first responders, we learn when we're approaching a patient, their body language. Are they going to be defensive? Are they on drugs? Is there a threat? Do we need to have scene awareness to like approach them differently? Do they have a fighting stance, or are they like open and like approachable? So he's using philosophies that like apply in all fields of life. It's just you need to figure out how that fits in with you. But I think it's that identifying those two things, that I think breathing could be overrated or underrated, and we don't think about how powerful it is until you practice it, and then you're like, wow, I'm actually in a clearer state of mind now. So that was just my picture.
That's great. That's exactly it. You know, I love that the authors start with examples first, because I think what we all know is what to do, right? I mean, we know to breathe. We know to, you know, we've heard before Dr. A with Stop Challenge Shoes, right? We know to use that. So oftentimes what happens is we're in our head. We're thinking or we're having some of these examples that are listed on page 70. And so I love how the first commitment was being aware, right? That self-awareness. Are you above or below the line? Because once you're good at identifying where we are, then you can employ a skill, right? Then you can employ conscious breathing. So I love how it's layered, because it really is first about being aware of where you are, and then you can employ the skill. But oftentimes what happens is we're already emotional. We didn't even realize we were going to go there. Now our adrenaline's rushing. We're all caught up in our feelings. And now we're like, I'm not employing Stop Challenge Shoes. I'm going to give it to this person right now. Right? I mean, that's typically what happens, right? But wouldn't it be cool if we could take that next step and go, oh, I'm identifying where I am. I'm not going to negotiate whether I'm above or below that. I already know I want to be above the line. So before I get to that place where my heart's beating into my throat, I'm ready to give it to the person verbally, right? We have a skill. I'm going to take 4 deep breaths, 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. I recommend to people all the time that I'm on Zoom calls with, remove yourself from the environment. I'm getting better at that. I have lots of practice. I have a teenager, and he gives me lots of opportunities to go, I'm going to walk away for a few minutes, and I'm going to come back when I'm ready to talk to you, right? Because I want to show up better. I really do. I want to show him so much better. So it is about knowing your posture and recognizing, okay, I'm getting into that fighting stance, like Chris mentioned. And oftentimes it's not the fighting stance. You know, it was funny. I was sharing this with my daughter not too long ago, and I need to be more aware of my posture, because I couldn't even tell you right now if you ask me, what's your posture when you're getting ready to defend? I don't know. I'm not that aware of it yet, but I'm going to start paying attention, because it'll be another cue for me to pay attention to, so that I can change my posture, right? Meaning, you know, like if I'm more hunched over, if my arms are crossed, I really don't know. I couldn't tell you today, but you know, pay attention to those things for yourself, so that it's another cue for you to go, okay, let me change my position. Let me get into a place where I'm more relaxed. Okay, I know physiologically that will allow me to respond in a way that's not in the drama triangle. So great stuff. That was awesome. So we talked about shifting. Chris brought it up. It is a biological, physiological thing that's happening. He talks about in shifting, the shift moves that change our blood and blood chemistry, and shift moves that change our consciousness. So there's 2 different types of shift moves. He illustrates both of them here. Obviously, in the second paragraph on page 71, that conscious breathing is what we talked about. Man, this is really key to practicing, because I can't tell you, and I'm sure you guys know if you've practiced doing this, this is really where the rubber meets the road. This really gives us the ability to start shifting, right? Okay, now I want to respond differently than I have in the past. Thinking about RE plus R equals O, right? That event is usually the trigger. I've been triggered. I realize where I'm at. I typically respond this way, but I'm not. I'm going to go walk away. I'm going to go breathe. And then I want to respond to drive a different outcome than I typically do. So radically changing our posture, and we talked about that. It literally, he says, defensive thoughts require a certain body posture. And shifting our posture helps with our defensiveness. I want to spend some time in wonder, because I think for me in this chapter, all of the other stuff was amazing. But in this second half, wonder for me was like, I don't know, it spoke to me. And I think more than anything, because it's something that I see brings peace into my own conversations when I'm able to ask and really work from this place. And I love how he starts talking about wonder in this state. He says wonder is both a shift move and a state of consciousness. So remember earlier he talked about shifting as either blood chemistry or shifting to a state of consciousness. Effective leaders learn to get into a state of wonder on a constant basis. So how do you do that? He gives some examples. I love how he brings it back to like children. Like children, they haven't developed the need to defend their ego yet. They don't have an identity yet. It's typically what's wrapped into their parents, who they are. My kids say it all the time. They're who they are is who we are. They always say like, well, we have enough money to do that. And I'll say, well, you don't have any money. What do you mean? Right? Just in joking. But the reality is their identity is who we are. But as we get older, we start to create our own identity. And typically, you've heard this before, but typically a lot of times that identity that we have, it doesn't always serve us well. It typically is an elaborate prison that keeps us longer than we want to stay, right? And so this is really the journey we're on. It's like, I want to create an identity that one drives relationships in my life forward, but I have to go first, right? And so that's what we're all doing. We're saying, hey, I want to go forward. I want to go first. So it's really the opposite of ego and being right. It's not having to know the answer. Wow, that was tough. Not having to know the answer, that's a new one for me. I have to know the answer, and part of that is just about being right. And so part about being right is not something that's going to serve me well, especially in what we do. Especially, I mean, just think for a minute with clients. Like, you may know the right answer, but oftentimes it's helping other people to develop the answer or the strategy. Giving somebody the answer doesn't always help move them forward, right? You guys can draw experiences with children, right? They know what to do, and you give them the right stuff, but if they're not a part of the plan, it's your plan, right? And so it's not going to happen. So he talks about in the last paragraph, he says, in our experience, most leaders replace natural wonder with figuring it out. Very, very common, especially in corporate America. And I would say for most Americans, right, it's if you don't know the answer, something's wrong with you. And if you can't figure it out, then something's really wrong with you, right? That's kind of our philosophy as Americans. So how many of you, when you were reading on page 73, when they said unscramble these letters, were like, what was funny is as you were reading the description below, I'm like, I'm doing this thing as I'm reading this, and I'm like, where is the answer at? Like, I just want to know the answer. I don't know. It's kind of funny to me, but I thought, man, I know some of you are feeling the same way. It's that fear-based environment. This is not to say that figuring out things is unimportant, but it is not wonder. And it is not really as much about learning as it is much about being right or finding the right answer. So all of you know the word is incense. Wonder is a very different experience. Man, is it different. It's the letting go. It's the risk and the letting go. And this is a really tough commitment. I know for me, I love this part. Once you're willing to be surprised by the unknown, the next step of assessing wonder is to ask the wonder questions, an open-ended question that has no right answer. How many of you, when you read that, were like, man, that's really tough for me? Yeah, that one is really tough. This is one that I'm working on. On page 74, there's some great questions. I'm going to highlight 3 of them because for me, and I'd love for you to share which one of those spoke to you most. So I'll give you the 3 that really spoke to me, and then I'd love to hear from you if you had some different ones and why. I wonder what I can learn today that will benefit everyone. So what was challenging for me when I read that, it was like, as I read it, I actually read it wrong, meaning I put a different word in. I wrote, I wonder what I can learn today that will benefit me. So even I'm reading the words and I actually read it as me, and that in reality it says everyone. So thinking outside of myself, right? How can it benefit everyone? What can I learn? I wonder what I can learn that can benefit from everyone, or that will benefit everyone. So for me, this I see a direct correlation every time I get to connect with a client, because I want you to think about what happens when we're in that environment with the client, and I did this today because I had read this before, and I said to them, I said, I want to learn something about you. I know there's something about you that I don't know that most people know about you that really know you. And they were just like, first thing that happened, big smile on their face. I mean, if you want to talk about connecting authentically with people and building trust, use some of these wonder questions. Use them with your spouse. If you want someone to feel significant and you actually want to learn something about them, ask some of these wonder questions. Here's the other one. I wonder what choices I could make today that would allow me to experience greater and greater fun and creativity. The last one I wrote down or circled was, I wonder what I could do today that would allow for a breakthrough in my life. So those three were really meaningful for me. You guys, what were some things that you, as you were reading through those, that you maybe had some different ones or some thoughts about some of those questions? Chris, Yessie, yours were the same. Perfect. Okay. Anybody else? Go ahead, Chris.
No, yeah. As far as what you're saying, those are awesome. Maybe not so much. I mean, all those wonder questions were good, but just to touch on wonder, like I really liked how he talks about, like, from a child's perspective, because kids just speak with no regard. We were watching that last night, that Chris Rock thing, and he says a kid will tell the truth to you and say, "Hey, your breath stinks," and you're just like, "What?" and it made me think about when I was reading this. Like, yeah, kids say the darndest things because they don't have a filter. And as we grow older and we experience things in life and see reactions of people, then we start putting filters of how we interact with others. But I like the rawness of like a child's thought and their wonder. And I think it's like he's just encouraging us to get back to that. Like, so that was just my little remark on that.
Yeah. I think, you walk into conversations where you're like, you want to get to know someone, you want to explore them, like what makes them tick, getting to know people. That wonder is super helpful in building relationships, and it doesn't allow any room for you to start to formulate your responses, right? I think that was, for me, really critical, because oftentimes as I'm having a conversation, I'm already thinking about what I'm going to say, as opposed to just really listening and really understanding what people have to say about whatever I've asked them, right? Like, tell me more about that. Like, what is that about that for you? That is just, I think, was a really powerful thing. I think this last section here, I wanted to just spend a couple minutes on, and just closing out the chapter is like kind of a final thought or final point, was our dedication to self-awareness. So this is really the last final thought here around this, so he talks about conscious leaders are passionately committed to knowing themselves. This is the basis of their willingness to regard every interaction as an opportunity to learn. He says, an astute person once said that all information falls into three buckets: what I know I don't know, and what I know I don't know I don't know. And I thought that was interesting, because most of the time, what do we focus on? What we know. But if you're looking to be the conscious leader of your life, isn't it important to know what you don't know and to know what you don't know that you don't know? I think we don't put enough emphasis on those things. And so what happens is all that we're doing is just trying to know the things that we're right about, right? We're kind of reinforcing that old model. Conscious leaders have a good grasp on what they know and are interested in. What they don't know and are exorbitantly drawn to what they don't know that they don't know. So that's definitely not me. That's definitely something that for me, that's some work I have to do, is being more aware of the things that I don't know, as opposed to just knowing the things that I don't know. Again, just I think more of it is just that self-awareness of who you are. How many of you, when you were reading this last section on page 76 and 77, talk about conscious leadership, man, for somebody to slam someone that hard, that's a tough one. Definitely not where I'm at today. What she took from that interaction, I'm obviously referring to Diana and Sarah's interaction. She had the opportunity. She could have easily, for all of us, if we got that kind of thing from somebody, we could have just chalked it up like, wow, she's got to grow. I mean, how many of us have said that in the last month? Like they've had somebody kind of attack them about something, and as opposed to taking that 1 or 2% of what they said was actually true about who you are or how they experience you, we chalk up the 98% of their comment that was just wrong, the way it was delivered, embellished, right? All of those things. And so that confirmation bias that we all have, like, see, they're wrong, right? Oh, they said all that. I definitely don't do that all the time, right? I mean, you hear those things. But the reality is what Diana did in that last section on 77 was really say, there's a part of what she's saying is true. And here's what's true about it. What's true is I still am very passionate about food, and I realize it's not serving my goals, like in terms of my health, and I can get better in these areas. And I really think for me, this was a good close to this chapter, because in terms of taking radical responsibility, we all have that opportunity to take every interaction and learn something about where we are, above the line, below the line. That is really the catalyst for us to start making changes in terms of being conscious leaders of our life. So thank you guys again for being here. And we are going to be in commitment number 3 starting next week, which is feeling all feelings. So feeling all feelings, commitment 3. What we're going to be doing this week, and if you missed it, we're from here going forward, and we'll pivot if we need to, is we're going to read 1 commitment a week. So next week, we're going to recap all of commitment 3. And so I'd love for you guys to write down some of your favorite things, notes, highlight some stuff, and we'll share it together on next week's call. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Tim.
All right. Take care, guys.
Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.